in construction. I am happiest when I am in a construction site. In fact, my friends jokingly call me a mason in suit, because even in my suit, I will go into my construction site because I love it. But I am successful in those things, not because I am the smartest, but because I am perhaps more passionate about those things than most others. And that is why I think I have succeeded in the law. That is why I have succeeded in construction. I advise you to follow your passion. Instead of following just the dreams of other people, instead of following other people you admire, learn from them, but follow your own path. Chart your own path. The other one is hard work. Trust me, success is all hard work. The lesser you work, the less likely that you will be successful. Of course, not all hard work would lead to success, but there is no success without hard work. You must imbibe these values if you want to be successful. Laziness is the recipe for failure. If you want to fail, the easiest way is to be lazy. But as you work hard also, try to be the best at what you do. Mediocrity, I know that is the basic standard in Gambia. It's the ultimate value in Gambia. But I'm telling you, mediocrity for me is failure. Try to be the best in what you do. Try to achieve excellence. Try to achieve the best value. That way you succeed. I have learned it from bad gate and from good gate. Because at bad gate, it didn't matter what you do. But even at bad gate, the thieves that came there, they tried to be the best thieves they possibly could be. So I learned that really to make it, you have to work hard. You have to be best at whatever you do. You must also stay focused. For us in 1984 to 1987, when we were in high school doing O and A level, we had a lot of distraction, the nerve syndrome. And it was so bad that some people got mental, because you sit in Gambia dreaming of Germany, you've never been there. Some people would tell you the streets in Germany, the streets in New York. Some people would talk to you in Swedish, they have never been there. Instead of focusing on maths, instead of focusing on chemistry, obviously you fail. And a lot of people failed simply because they did not stay focused. They were very badly distracted. You see, whenever you start doing something, especially the first time, the prospects of failing are always higher than the prospects of succeeding. How do you turn it around? You have to keep pushing. Never give up, never give in. And just be persistent. Keep doing, keep going. You see, there is this saying in Wolof, Kuyagachi 10, bag fekalafa. And there's an equivalent in English. If you hang around a barber shop long enough, you will get a haircut. And that is something I believe in. You have to keep pushing. You don't have to give up. I mean, definitely at some point, you would make a breakthrough. To get something, you have to give something. And oftentimes, if it is for the first time, you would have to give something that you've never given before. So, my mantra is, give everything that you can. Your time, your talent, even prayers are important. Give it all. Because the chances that you take and the people that you meet and the faith that you have are the things that will ultimately define you, and those are the things that will ultimately determine where you end up. Take your chances and be persistent. But in all this, if what you have to deliver is not of quality, is not of value, it won't interest anybody. Even the comedian has to sell a good joke. If it is a flat joke like I would normally give, nobody would buy it. So whatever you do, it has to be of great value. I look at this room and I see some interesting anecdotes, like don't be normal, be creative. So that is something of value. You have to think and think outside the box. And that takes me to the next point. It is only good ideas that would sell. Nobody is interested in bad ideas. So to succeed, embrace good ideas. Don't romanticize ideas. Scrutinize them, dissect them, consider and reconsider them, and choose the good ideas. Don't choose the ideas you romanticize. You see, the idea of being an accountant was something I romanticized because I saw the Manjangs and the Alphabaris very nicely dressed. Everybody was talking about them. Oh, they are the guys who broke the glass ceiling because they passed ACCA. I wanted to be like them. It was an idea that I romanticized. But it wasn't a good idea for me because I was not cut of the same cloth. I was more a person of words than a person who crunches numbers. I was never meant to be a bean counter. With all due respect, I didn't mean to say that all accountants were bean counters. But for me, if I had embraced accounting, I would have been a bean counter. And that wasn't the ideal for me. So embrace the good ideas and just not ideas you romanticize. Be prepared to take risks. Nothing is worth the while unless and until you take risks. Be prepared to fail. In fact, there is much to learn from failing. I remember my first common entrance, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot in life. So, but if I had succumbed to failure at that time, perhaps maybe I would have ended up being a guy who pushes canoes at pool. But I learned from failure. Embrace it and be prepared to take another risk at being embarrassed. So I took another stab at it. But it's by accepting to be embarrassed, by accepting that failure is part of it, and that it should just be a springboard to try again. Take more risks, and that is the only recipe or the only formula for success. In fact, I read somewhere that Thomas Edison did about 1,000 experiments, before he was able to create the light bulb. How many of us have tried one thing 1,000 times? I don't think any of us have. So this just shows that practice, practice, practice would lead to perfection. You take the same risk several times and learn along the way. You get to conquer it. You get to master it. And don't quit. If you fail, keep trying again. You see, I was so passionate about building when I left the ICC and was doing private work, and I had a bit of spare time. I wanted to do building. I did not trust the environment in Gambia, especially for a lawyer that time, especially a vocal person like me. The Jame environment was not the most conducive. So I went to Senegal, even though people told me, oh boy, nga dem Sénégal gars yi dañ laa égal de dañ laa na. I took the risk. I ventured, I went in, and I dare say that I have done very, very well in Senegal. But I had to take the risks in order to be, look, challenges are meant to be conquered. So mountains are meant to be climbed. So be ready to take risks if you want to be successful in life. But you see, these principles did not work just for me. They have worked for a lot of people that I know. And I just mentioned a few who are very close to me, whose experiences are quite extraordinary. I mean, look at Mohammed Jah, for instance. He refused to work for anybody when we finished university. He set up his own business. Now he owns a multinational telco. It is just these principles of hard work, honesty, decency, persistence, insist on making it, that really worked for him. Today, he is such a huge success story. Everybody would want to be like him. I know Alaji Sanyang. He finished LK, that is Latin Kunda Secondary here. It wasn't even a high school. He was selling cow dung near Abuko. Today, he went to the US, educated himself at Columbia University. Can you imagine from LK to Columbia University? Today, he is a vice president in one of the biggest construction companies in the world. But these things are not also a reserve to those who went to university. I know people who haven't even darkened the walls of any institution of higher education, but they are very successful in life. Look at the Hardim guys, the Tufts and others. It is some of these principles that made them who they are. You pursue your passion, you work hard, you embrace good ideas, and you push and persist. Someday, you would just make a breakthrough and success would dawn on you. I am sure that if all of you embrace those principles, maybe, just maybe, from amongst you, many millionaires would emerge. Thank you very much.
Wow. That's a really inspiring story. And can I move this? Yes. Okay. Just to summarize, or just to say thank you to Esa for such an inspiring story. And I'm sure thousands, if not millions, will be listening to hundreds of thousands will be listening to this speech over and over on the internet and benefit from it. There is a saying by, is it a theologian? It's a famous theologian with many famous quotes. He says, don't say what the world needs. Don't just go out and say you want to do what the world needs, but think about what makes you come to life, and you do that. Just like what Esa is saying, I'm just trying to emphasize that point of passion. Just follow your passion, because he says the world needs people who have come to life. So you do your best, you do what you are best at, and don't see somebody in a nice suit and say, I want to be like him because he's an accountant, and you're not good with the recipe, with the fundamentals of what makes him that good and as such a good accountant. See what you are best at, and you do that. The world needs people who are best at what they do. That's why today in Gambia, everybody is talking about Manjang, everybody is talking about Esa, because they pursued what they are best at. If Esa had followed Manjang, he might not have succeeded as the accountant. And I'm sure Manjang, during his time, he'll have a chance to speak in a minute, he was also looking up to other people. If he had chosen something that was not accounting, you wouldn't have seen the best of Manjang. it would have been lost somewhere. So this is one of the very important things that we take from this. So, and like he said, take risks. You know, do not give up. Failing once doesn't mean that you have failed, you're a failure. So you continue. And the nice story about Thomas Edison, who tried 1,000 times trying to get the light bulb. What are we going to do today without a light bulb? But 1,000 times, being persistent, he did not give up. So that's very important. So you try it 1,000 times. Finally, we have a light bulb. And finally, he is immortalized. Everywhere you go, you hear Thomas Edison. In fact, the most famous footballer, Pele, was named after Edison. His real name is Edison because he said they moved into the, he was born the day that they got the light bulb. And of course, because of, they got light in the house. And because of that connection with Thomas Edison, he's called Edison. So again, we are blessed to have Pele, and we are blessed to have him named after the most famous, one of the most famous, how do you call it, innovators. And how is he a famous innovator? Because he did not give up. Like Esa said, 240 was not such a great mark back then. But if he had stopped there, we wouldn't have the Esa we have today. So this is one of the most important things I heard from this. And well, there are several, because you have choices. There are people coming from Germany, yes. Back in those days, we say things like nerves, side of a nerve. You know, we have this, because everybody wanted to be like those people with gold chains and driving a Mercedes-Benz or BMWs. They are the first people who came with BMWs from Germany. So if you wanted to take a shortcut and be like them, and you don't know the risks that take from there, it has to be legal risks, I guess. So you take risks, but they have to be legal. What they did there was not legal. And okay, they were also lucky that most of them did not have to apply for visa. Back then, that was back then. I heard the Nigerians spoiled that for us, because Nigerians came and started using Gambian passports, and because of that, they stopped Gambians from, you know, just traveling without a visa to the UK and Canada and other countries. Yeah, Scandinavia and other countries, you see. So, but even UK, Gambians didn't need a visa at some point. But, like I said, we don't have to talk about back way. We've talked about that in detail in previous conferences, but that is also a risk that is not well calculated. So, yes, it's important to take risks, but we take calculated risks. And we can leave questions for Esa and have Manjang start. I don't know what is the, what everybody feels. And if Esa is not in a hurry to go anywhere, we can just have Manjang go ahead. Definitely. Well, that's his childhood hero and my childhood hero. And I'll tell you, my nickname when I was in high school was MDI, because I used to study. I used to grab my bags and go to MDI every day. My sister is here. She would attest to that. And one of the reasons why I went to MDI was because of Mr. Manjang. He might not remember, but he spoke. He was teaching courses at the MDI back then, and through my uncle Sankung, Manjang talked to the director, the director at the MDI, to allow me to go there for studies. Perhaps I'm also here today because of his help. I graduated as an engineer. I passed my courses in high school and went studied engineering, perhaps because of that help from Mr. Manjang. And thank you, Mr. Manjang. So without further ado, no need for introduction again. We pass the mic to.
They've clearly made things difficult for me. So I'm not sure how I will go about it, but I'll give it my very best. Unfortunately, I am not going to talk about my experiences, even though that's what I said. I will rather talk about empowering the youth. I think that's a more topical subject. So I thought I will cover that. But before I get into that, I just thought I'll interject a little bit and just do a very brief quiz. Not a quiz, sorry. Just a survey. I just wanted to know, how many people here, not by assuming or thinking, but really just by knowledge, from knowledge, how many here can tell me 5 generations from their family from the same tribe? Not many. Yeah, not many. 1 or 2, not many. I assume so. The reason I'm saying that, because frankly, I think tribe is really not very deep. I think we make it deep, but it's really not very deep. I am Muhammadu Manja. I am Mandinka. It is the spoken language in my family home. And the language is very fundamental to me. It is fundamental because it is how we communicate in my family home. But you know what? It does not define me. Not at all. Absolutely not. It does not define me. And it does not, your language does not define any one of you. It does not. I think what actually defines us is the choices we make and the path we follow or create. It is about the way we live our lives. That is what defines us. And that's what unites us, or that is what should unite us. It is about consistency. It's about honesty. It's about dependability. And it's about loyalty. And some of them, as I talked about, is about hard work. These are the values that define us. And so I am always dumbfounded. You know, when, how come you hear someone's surname, or you hear their accent, or you learn the town they come from, and almost reflexively, you take them to be your enemy. You know, I never really understand that. And that cannot be right. You know, it cannot be. You see, I'm saying this thing because tribal loyalties caused close to 1 million deaths in about a few months in Rwanda in the 1990s. It caused post-election havoc in Kenya. Thousands of people were killed. Over 600,000 people displaced in about 2 months, between December of 2007 to February of 2008. It turned Beirut, Lebanon's beautiful cosmopolitan capital, into a wasteland in 1970s. And I can go on and on and on. And I think our deepest loyalty must really be to Mother Gambia. This is the cause that should unite us, and this is where we should unite around to move the country. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the vitriol that tribe is spraying across the country is very dangerous, and that should not be the uniting factor. And I think it's important and critical, especially for the youth, to always remember that it is not deep, it is not what unites, it is about our choices we make in life. It's about our values, our core values. That is really what is fundamental, and that is what we must always remember and stick to. Now, I just thought I will interject that because it is topical, it is important to do that, before I come on to my topic. My topic is really about empowering the youth. And first, I would like to thank Aliou Basadi Jawara for putting this conference together, and for his determination to encourage young people to be active, innovative, creative, and responsible citizens. I believe in young people. I do. And in fact, that is why I'm here today. And I want to dwell a little bit on what it means being young. Being young is about more than age. Being young carries endless possibilities. Being young is being curious, is being creative, is full of energy, is too much guts, and sometimes a lot of impatience. Being young is adrenaline-charged emotions with an unstable sense of self-esteem. Being young is filled with insecurity, loneliness, and disguised vulnerability. but being young also holds a unique joy of life. Everything comes in brighter colors. You're better informed, more socially responsible, and more knowledgeable about the digital and social revolution that is around us today. I mean, after all, most of you guys belong to Generation Z. The digital world is your way of life. But every single one of you, and each person lives life differently. You all have resources, and you have skills, personality and experience that deserve to be discovered and nurtured. You face many, many burdens. You are more likely to be unemployed than adults. Yet, we cannot survive without genuinely listening to the young people and developing their skills. In Gambia today, almost 60% of the population is under the age of 25. So the energy, enthusiasm, and capacity of this large demographic can bring substantial dividend. But however, to get the dividend, you must invest. I mean, Esa talked about the hard work and how he went through in his education. So it's important to invest, and invest in education, invest in skills training, and in all the other services which widen opportunities. It also means a commitment to participate in the economic, social, and political movement. It's very, very important for young people to participate in all these three areas. See, there is an old saying that nothing about us without us. You know, so decisions that will be made about you, you have to be willing to give a meaningful input into the choices which are impacting on and shaping your lives. I think that is fundamental. You cannot just sit by and let decisions be made about you without your participation. You will determine Gambia's future. Now, that's the narrative everybody says. They will tell you the youths are the future. Now, that is true, but don't be consumed by that narrative alone. You see, for make no mistake, you have the power to define what we look like today. Because after all, you are the majority of the country. So you have the power. So it's not about waiting for the future. You have the power to determine how Gambia looks like today. But you will only be able to define our today by being active participants. Not just as we have it in this country, social media warriors. We have a lot of people talking on social media. That does not make a change. It's important, absolutely important. But you have to be active participants to make a difference. You see, the political leadership must be complemented by visionary and transformational youths who must think outside of the box with a firm resolution and determination to move forward. We have to move forward from business as usual, and we have to go into business unusual. I mean, you know, when we talk about when we talk about we need to fundamentally shift and fundamentally change our minds, we're still in a business as usual mode. So business as usual, whatever it was that we were doing for years, that is what we still continue to do. And we have to move away from that. So you should be at the forefront of change. I think you have the spirit to make things happen. You are savvy about technology. You are more knowledgeable about the world around us. And you are more interconnected. Yet, as a group, you face very high levels of unemployment. And as many of you today despair really of the current economic reality and trends in generating the needed jobs. But you see, and there's a lot of people who are dependent on central government for employment. But you know, you see any country where the state, and that's any country, where the state is the largest employer, is quintessentially a failed state. You know? So your destiny really lies in your own hands. And only those who dare to venture out of their narrow prism, as they say in Mandinka, Mansakunda Doko, you have to get your mind away from that. Those people will form the nucleus of tomorrow's captains of industry and successful entrepreneurs. See, the pioneers of post-independence private sector, including my own father of blessed memory, including Aliu's father of blessed memory, unfortunately did not inspire us to move forward with even more ambitious ideas and goals, because we got entrapped into this public and civil service syndrome. Every school goer here, your mind is almost driven and set to work for government, to work for the public sector or private sector. You're really not thinking about anything else. You can see, those who remember in the 80s or just after independence, if you had gone towards Wellington Street, forgive my knowledge of the streets now, I remember it as Wellington Street, I don't know what it is called now. If you had gone along those streets in those days, the entire street was lined by indigenous Gambian business people. They are not anymore. They are not anymore. Because we were not at the time, we were not inspired to follow that route because of this Mansakunda Doko. So I think we need to go beyond that syndrome. And also, our public education system at both secondary and tertiary levels has unfortunately succeeded in producing graduates that the economy hardly needed, instead of those who can really make it an envy for others. And let me tell you, size, believe me, is not a disadvantage. If only we know where our competitive advantage lies. Singapore is one example. It's a very small, tiny country, but it's a high-income country now. But that's a bit afar. If we come closer, we have Mauritius. It's just been recently considered a high-income country, and Seychelles. So it's not size. It's not about size. It's really about getting the right people in the right places. The University of the Gambia will only really have the desired impact if it produces graduates in numbers that could make the public sector the least attractive option for young people. Its business school must be a catalyst for graduating students who will hit the ground in business and not become desk workers, scrambling for overcrowded public and private sector jobs. In an economy, our economy really lacked any transformative and innovative infrastructure. So depending on that will really not take us anywhere. Now, it is for these reasons, and really that is where I want to really focus on. It is really for these reasons, and it is so critical that we take a fresh approach to entrepreneurship, to equip you with the skills to create your own jobs, and as you succeed, to create jobs for others too. You see, how can we do that? How can we promote youth entrepreneurship? I think it's important, therefore, first, to establish mentoring and career advisory services in schools and UTG. I think, really, we went through school. Esa talked about, you can see his struggles into the field to go to. You can see, I probably stumbled onto my field accidentally because there was no advisory services in schools. There's really nothing that guides you as to where you want to go. Really, for any country to move forward, you need that. You need to guide the young people from early stages of their life. Try to tell them what it is that they need to do, where they need to focus. That is what makes a difference. That is what transforms places. You don't let people to discover things by accident. By then, it is too late. You nurture the skills, you see something, you nurture it, you move it forward, you get the people somewhere. So I think that's important. Number two, it's about establishing avenues to address seed funding challenges. I think if you want to go to business, funding is always a problem. So we need to find ways of doing it. And there are many, many possibilities to do it. It's not about bank loans. Bank loans never start a business. You know, people talk about funding. It's not, but you know, thirdly, and perhaps more importantly, is your role. I think you need to play a fundamental part in reviewing our current paradigm. We have largely inherited an education system that frankly was meant to create clerks for the colonial governments of the time. That is what our education system is. And in 50 plus years since our independence, little has been done to move away from that creation of clerks and to educate and upskill youth to become employers. You know, every parent's dream during my time, your time, and if we don't change the generation after you, is always to get their sons and daughters to get a good white-collar job in an office. You know, after all, as we say here, you know, wacha rahasu, you know, wacha rahasu jobs. It's always degrading. You know, that's the mindset. But if Henry Ford has had the same mindset and concept, we will never be driving motor cars today. So wacha rahasu is not degrading. It's actually a fantastic job. In fact, these are the things that make a difference. These are the things that move the country forward. But that's our mindset, because that's what our parents and society is made us believe. You don't go to work and come back to wash your hands before you eat. You know, we believe you have to come from an office and put a suit and a tie and come back and be comfortable. That is not the only job. That's why we are really not progressing. And few people really appreciate that with this aspiration comes a tacit acceptance that if such job is not forthcoming, then our son or daughter has therefore failed. And as a nation, the concept of creating wealth for oneself and for one's community is not well grasped or appreciated. Our idea of wealth accumulation is to have a white-collar job in an office and engage in, unfortunately, either direct corruption, stealing from the government and the people of the Gambia, or indirect corruption through solicitation or various conflict of interest positioning. Now, we respect individuals who made money from Gamtel, for example, or made money from customs. Or we see somebody come from Europe driving a big car and putting up a tall building. We don't even know how he or she got the money. Maybe clearly not legitimate. But these are the people we celebrate. And until we really start moving away from this, we will forever be in the situation we are. We do not really appreciate people who started off with a small shop and went on to become serious entrepreneurs in the country. See, the direct consequence of this frame of mind is that the majority of Gambian entrepreneurs or creators of wealth and employment are either illiterate or foreigners. We have people from other countries in West Africa who come here with very little and end up owning enterprises. We have foreigners from Lebanon and India who make fortunes in the Gambia. But please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should not resent these people. Not resent them. I think we should rather emulate them, learn from them, see how they start small, and how they, by dint of hard work, I think Esa has in his speech talked quite a number of times about hard work. So we need to see how with a dint of hard work, determination, some of the values you talk about, I'm repeating them because clearly these are self-evident truths. Through hard work, determination, persistence, and frugality, they build up their businesses butut by butut until their own enviable fortunes. See, the very notion that if I cannot be a clerk and work in a government office with a suit and a tie, then I would rather go across the Mediterranean, risking life and limb, to wash plates, to be a security guard, or other such menial jobs than walk the path of entrepreneurship in my own country. Be prepared to start small, grow step by step, through honesty and the sweat of your brow. That notion must be broken. If we want to make progress, we must break that notion. You know, a lot of young people are waiting on government to create jobs. And this is definitely the role of government. It is. You know, so I don't think moving that, it is the role. Everywhere you go to in the world, this is the role. But however, you know what governments can do best is creating an enabling environment. That's what governments can do best. There's no government that all government, they have limited capacity of itself to employ. You know, they have very limited capacity. There is no government the world over that can employ 100% of the output of all universities and other higher institutions of learning. So for your generation, I think an opportunity clearly has been lost, just as it was with us. You know, with life skills is in entrepreneurship. You know, if you go to schools now, I don't know now, but I know for a fact during my time, schools you will never find, I mean, I'll give a story of a friend of mine. Were in Rwanda at one point in time. And as we were driving along, there's a Cameroonian lady in the car who saw groundnuts, but the groundnuts were on the stems. And the lady said, I want some fresh groundnuts. So we drove back, stopped, went to check. But we were with a Gambian lady who is in about her 50s. And she was standing there quite puzzled and amazed because she could not see groundnuts because the groundnuts were on the stem. So she couldn't, and she kept asking, but where are the groundnuts? You know, and I think that's a fundamental thing because that tells you here, if I ask a lot of people here, a lot of us probably have seen groundnuts as in the market, either shelled or out of the shells, but not many people would have actually seen the raw groundnuts in the farm. Not many people see that, particularly people who have lived their lives around the urban areas. And that goes with a lot of other things. A lot of us here probably have never put a spanner or a plier in our hands. You know, a lot. So, and I think these are the life skills that really move countries forward. And this is what we are lacking. And even our school system tells us anything along those lines is a failure. So when you talk about handiworks, agriculture, carpentry, fitter services. But it's like I said before, they are all wachara hasuligays. So really, we don't want to go there, but they are not failures. Most countries, this is really what moved them forward. It's not a government job. So I say this because life skills in entrepreneurship and working for self is never really taught in schools. So the vast majority of us, like I said, agribusiness are closed as we have not been taught agriculture. We, like I mentioned before, I'm a glorified class. Now, when I say glorified class, I mean, I'm really referring to office jobs. You know, most office jobs really, it is administrative. So it's just really a glorified class. I think the challenge for you is really much harder, but you now need to change your paradigm and understand that you can and should be wealth creators. Now, to do so is challenging. It demands, I mean, as I said it again, so I will repeat it because really they are self-evident truths. It demands hard work. It demands lots of hours, lots of sacrifices, and more than anything, it requires the fortitude to ensure even when your colleagues and friends are in jobs where they can steal and show people that they are successful. When you have to keep your hard-earned money and be ridiculed for not being a success story, you maintain your discipline. This clearly will impact those who are married, your husbands, your wives, but certainly your parents, all of whom might think of you as a failure. But if you stick to your plan and discipline of saving earnings, you have to save earnings, and investing capital, because I think these are the two fundamental things. Frugality is very important. So every earning you have to save it. It's almost a ratio of how you do things. You almost say, when I earn 100, I will really make sure at least 30% of that is actually saved. And as you save your earnings, you start building capital, and then you invest your capital. This is the recipe for success. It is not so much about getting a loan, getting a big capital to start. I think we will touch on a couple of examples, even within this country, where we have seen people being successful without a big loan, being successful from not even from the traditional source of family and friends funding, but they've been successful because they have been saving their earnings and investing their capital. And that is important. So I apologize. I know I may have disappointed you by not offering you sweet platitudes or telling you there is an easier way. Because unfortunately, there is no sustainable easy way. There is none. It's all short term. You know, you may see, you know, those people you see with their big cars and running and stealing, and it's very short term. It's not successful. It's not sustainable. The only sustainable way of creating wealth and improving and increasing it is through hard work, is through determination, is through frugality. That's the only way. So I will leave you with 4 stories. 2 of them are global, and the other 2 will be local. Steve Jobs, I think we all had Steve Jobs. I've seen quite a few people with Steve Jobs with Apple products. He was a school dropout who went on to build a business and left behind the Apple empire. Today, Apple is the largest publicly listed company. It's worth about $1.58 trillion. The second biggest publicly listed company was also set up by a school dropout. It was Microsoft. And Microsoft today is worth $1.52 trillion. Now, but you can give you many, many, many examples of people who have done this thing. I mean, Esa talked about a couple who have not gone to university. But there are so many of them who have actually built successful businesses without necessarily going to higher education, doing any higher education. So that's one. Second is Captain Sanders. He was a cook, and he was worth over $200 million when he sold Kentucky Fried Chicken. He sold it at his old age. He built that business at his old age. So really, there's no time limit. But certainly, this is a better time, because this is when you can take a lot more risk, because you have the advantage of time to correct the mistakes that you made along the way. But certainly, so you are in a very opportune position. You can really make significant difference. But it just requires, like I said, your perseverance and determination to be successful. Now, these 2 are examples from far. Now, coming back home, some of you who may have gone to Marina, and really not just a couple of years ago, you probably know Babukar Jallo, Pirti. It's called Pirti. When kids were in school and learning, he was getting bread or boiled potatoes, boiled egg, and mayonnaise, and mixing them into a spread and putting it on the bread, hence the name Pirti Parta, because, you know, the motion of Pirti Parta in this thing. So, you know, now, and he started first with selling mints. So you can imagine the capital this guy had. He had really nothing. He probably had just change, because selling mint to students at break time and then graduating to selling bread with boiled eggs and boiled potatoes, It's nothing, but it is the perseverance and the determination to be successful. It is not about how much money he has. It is about his vision. It is about his determination. It is about wanting to create employment. Today, he has a brand which he calls Pirti in forex bureaus. I mean, he's all across the country, employing lots of people. He is today the envy of his patrons at Marina. Now they're busy scrambling for the glorified clerical jobs. See, where clerks see demeaning jobs, entrepreneurs see success. And that, but we can all be. You know, you can be a determined entrepreneur, or you can be a reluctant entrepreneur. Now, a reluctant entrepreneur is the one who is expecting and depending on a government job or an office job, but when you do not have it, you are forced to go into some kind of creating an employment for yourself. That's a reluctant entrepreneur. So somehow, we will all be one way or the other. Now, I'll give you another one, Lamarana Jalo. The older folks here will probably know Ramalana. Lamarana used to have, you know, a Bitikimbaga. I'm sure some of you know Bitikimbaga. It's the wooden shelf with a handle which hawkers used to carry around. At the time, they were putting cigarettes and, in those days, black mint, but I'm sure they'll now put ginger there, you know, and they'll be going around and selling. That is what Lamarana started with. And Lamarana became a multimillionaire in this country from those humble beginnings. Now, the reason I keep repeating this thing is to be successful, and this is what holds many of us back, because we almost assume that to make it, we have to start big. But I can tell you, all those people who have succeeded actually started small. Nobody starts big. You see, you cannot survive a startup business from a bank loan. You cannot. The interest rates are ridiculously high. Even in the West, where they are low, in single digits, it's difficult and challenging to do. And in this country, actually, what banks do is an asset swap. Banks don't really lend. They really don't take a risk. To get money from a bank, you have to deposit your asset with them. So you give them your asset, they give you your money in return. So you're really just swapping an asset, and on top of that, they charge you a very ridiculous fee for the service. That hurdle rate becomes exceptionally difficult to cross. So you actually end up failing. So don't. You need to go start small. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, but this is what you must. Lamarana today is in Guinea-Conakry. You will find him plying between Conakry and Labe, and very big into construction now. I can go on. I can give you many, many homegrown examples. I mean, Esa mentioned two, Taf and Mohammed Jah. None of them started with big capital, you know, but they are quite successful. So I'll give you those are the three examples those are the two examples from the Gambia, and the two examples from outside the Gambia. But another day, I will tell you about stop-step pharmacy. You know, stop-step pharmacy is when this old lady came from Freetown with her entire family. And all of them lived in a small supermarket called Stop-Step Shop on Kairaba Avenue, you know, opposite the then main office of the Independent Electoral Commission. They were not far from there. They started, I mean, very small. The entire family was living really in one small area. That's where the entire family was living. Today, Stop-Step Shop has grown to become Medicare clinic and the Stop-Step chain of pharmacies. We'll probably talk about Vijay, how he started with less than $100,000 in capital, around Serekunda towards Tipagaras, around the bridge there. He paid $10,000 his rent, and $90,000 is he used it to buy goods and then leverage himself. You know, like here, you go to a shop, you buy a little, they give you some other stock. So he paid 90,000 stock and leverage himself. And so maybe the 90 become 180 and then started business. Today, all the Al-Vihaj supermarkets around this country is owned by him. When he came here, he came really with nothing. Today, we all talk about Tariq Musa, TK Motors. When TK came here, he was an employee of the then Mazda Motors. And then he grew from there to become what he is. I think the difference between some of these successful people and ourselves is not for the lack of opportunity. It is really the perseverance. The problem with a lot of us is because we celebrate too early. You know, we start clapping for ourselves before we even see the seeds of our fruit. And that is what we must stop if we really want to make, not only improve our livelihoods and ourselves, but actually move this country forward. I think, but these stories are for another day. You see where clerks see the meaning word, entrepreneurs see opportunity. You know, the case of Pirti, when the kids were looking at Pirti, they were thinking, that's a menial job. I mean, you know, what is about selling mint when I am hoping I will become the permanent secretary of one of the ministries or sometime. That is my thinking, but Pirti is on his mint and thinking, you know what, I will employ these guys. Do we ever wonder, for example, why Lebanese Gambians are not competing with us for the jobs of the government? Why? Why do we think they are not competing with us? They are Gambians like us. We are not more educated than them. But why? But sometimes we turn around and are very envious of them. But we almost pretty much had the same kind of opportunity. So I think we need to change our paradigm. We need to change our mindsets. We need to really refocus ourselves and begin to think, what is it that we have to do differently in order to move this country forward? But also in doing so, move ourselves forward. I think that is very, very important. And I think this is the only time when stealing will give way to honesty. When we really start saying, we are not interested by just working for government. When we have entrepreneurs moving this country forward, when we start having that, then stealing will give way to honesty. And then people of integrity will take over the helm of the government and create an even more level playing field for all who dare to become giants. I will leave it there, but before I close, I want to leave you with a quote with one African-American Blake in Americas in the 1873 thereabout, and he says 3 or 4 points. To say, be grateful to luck. I think that's very important because you hard work and everything comes with luck, so be grateful for luck. Pay no mind to thunder. I think that is important because here there's so much vitriol, there's so much talk, there's so much this. But if we focus and pay attention on those things, we will never move forward. I think we need to get to a point where we say, you know what, to hell with what everybody is saying. Be so focused and determined on what you see as your purpose and your objective to drive yourself. I think that is the only time we will really make a difference. That's the only time we will get somewhere. That is the only time we will be successful. That is the only time this country will move forward. We cannot be held back by what people will talk about us, because people will continue saying something about us, because that is the nature of society. That is what you have in a poverty-driven culture, in a poverty-driven society. So we have to move away from that. So pay no mind to thunder. Listen to birds. But listening to birds is important because you have to connect with nature. That is the best way to relax yourself. And hate no one. If you don't hate no one, you really don't have no problems. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Manjang. The first thank you is, of course, to help me to get to MDI and study at MDI. So the second thank you definitely is this very inspiring speech. Like I said, as I was saying, these Commonwealth scholarships were very few back then, and they were reserved for the science students. Well, I was a science student, and I managed to get one. And thank you. Well, I wouldn't have got it if I was a commerce student or an art student. But Mr. Manjang helped in that because he got me that room at MDI to study, to have private studies, and I was there every day, every evening. On Tobaski Day, I grabbed my bags and went to MDI. That's all I did. At university, I did the same, and at work, I worked every day. I never stopped. That's what I do. And my other passion is to try to see what I can give back to my alma mater, my primary school and my high school, and in general to the youth. And I thought the best way to do it is to invite the experts and to talk to you. And that is my contribution to create the platform for your inspiration. And I hope it's just been a great 2 lectures, really. And one of the things that you can always go back to is both of them said is, be yourself. Everybody else is taken, like the quote that you always see in the on social media. So that's important, to be yourself, push yourself, challenge yourself to success, and do not give up. They've both said that. One thing important that Mr. Manjang said also is that the institutions that I guess we inherited it that way from the colonial times is that it doesn't provide. And I've gone to schools. For some reason, I always get invited to schools to talk to the youth, to even primary school, even kindergarten level. At times, I get invited to talk. And what you see in other schools in Canada, for example, is that there is continuous monitoring of the students. And then they always streamline, they always take you in a direction where you are most effective. Some students are just great at sports, so they're encouraged to do a lot more sports and the particular sport that they're good at. So they do that alongside with the education, but with more focus on that sport. And some are very handy. Some students are very handy, they're very good with electronics, and they encourage them to do more of that, and the school system takes care of that. So in the end, nobody really fails. Nobody really is left behind. You know, 10 years down the line, you have doctors from that classroom, you have lawyers, you have accountants, and you have people who are very good with metalwork or carpenters or professional athletes, because of the school environment is such. We are not so blessed with such, but it's something that we can think about. I'm sure we have the next is questions and answer. We can see what Mr. Manjang would suggest, how we can insert that into our curriculum to make sure that, you know, I've seen kids that are just not good at the school, and they just not passing any exam, but they keep forcing and they repeat class after class after class. And if you create an environment in the school and they have a workshop in that school and where they can practice, perhaps you'll have a carpenter out of those, you'll have a tailor out of those. So that's something that we should think about and see how we can advise, even a formal letter to the School of Education, and see how, to the Ministry of Education, and see how we can introduce into this stuff. Mr. Manjang talks about Wacha Rahas. There is, Pakeba is not here, for example. There is a lady educated lady here, around here, who was not married. One of our masons was kind of interested in the lady and wants to use Pakewa to approach the lady for marriage. And he says, this lady, you are not educated, you are wacharahas. She's not going to honor your request. You know, so we have this mentality that we have to break. You know, and that man works as a mason, but makes more than many people working in offices. We have this building with many offices, and I know what some of them make. That man makes a lot more than they do in a week, more than what some people make in a month. But he cannot compete with them in getting married to a lady. We have another scholar talking about marriage, and I hope you all wait for that as well. You know, Mr. Manjang talked about something like starting up a business with humble means. Don't think that you have to be rich before you start a business. Start with whatever means you have. And he also said, the savings, for example, whatever you make, whatever you are doing today, you don't use up all your savings, your earnings. Make sure you have savings planned for the future. So once you do that, you have, and then invest, like he said. And he said, if you look at a small shop or boutique in Baga, for example, you always see foreigners or people who are not educated. So if you have little education, you are blessed with high school education or university education, don't think that the only option you have is to wear a suit and work in an office. Like I say, everybody is taken, be yourself. You know, if it works for somebody, it may not work for you. You know, start creating and thinking out the box and outside the box, as I mentioned that. So start with whatever little means that you have. And we make sure also we pass on this information, we try hard, and we see how the experts, before this symposium ends, we see what practical advice they can give to an individual with whatever stage you are at today. How can you move from this stage to the next level? And to be like the man who had a boutique in Baga, and today he's a millionaire. So everybody laughed at him. And there is also Modupol that I heard his stories in Banjul that people used to laugh at him. You know, he used to ride his bicycle, you know, trying to sell whatever little means. So, but from that, he became a multi-millionaire. So it's important to start with whatever little means that you have and move up. So it's very rich, and I have maybe about 6 pages from each. I cannot just summarize all of it here, but we now move to, I believe, if somebody has any contribution to do to this. If not, we move to an important, Aminata has something to do?
From Montessori. I sent you a text.
Yes, okay, I didn't, okay. And at the moment, yes, right now? Okay, and then we can leave. I was going to say that it's a very, I'll just, what, no, what?
Me too, I just.
You just move a little bit? No, you. So.
Nasi will give you. See, that's why I left. That's why.
Two.
I won't extend it past hour.
So while. After
Nasi, maybe there can be
the question and answers, yes. Yeah, so after Nasi, then we'll have questions and answers, and please stick around. And so you can also write your questions on these that have passed. You can either come forward and ask your questions on the mic, or you can write them and bring them forward. So without further ado, we invite Nasi to the podium, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Nasi Semarena. I hope I'm here for more than the gender balance.
Absolutely.
So I run a Montessori school, but I'm not a teacher. I actually wanted to speak today in a dialogue form so that we could have a dialogue. I think perhaps one of the best ways of education is actually to have a dialogue. So two of my favorite things to talk about are hope as well as liberation. So one of the lawyers, besides Esafal, is here. So there's a lawyer who works at the Equal Justice Initiative called Brian Stevenson, who's been working for decades on liberating African Americans as well as other people who have been wrongly accused in jail. So one of the things he says is that he gave a commemoration speech at a few places, but one of the things he says is that young people have the power to change the world, and it's important to know that. So when I went to university in a different context, one of the things I was told was that I have the power to change the world, and that has always stuck with me. Unfortunately, I'm not a youth anymore. I'm 40 this year. Yes, 40. But one of the things he says, and he uses 4 things, and I leave you to find out the rest, but the 2 that stick with me, or 3 maybe, is stay in proximity with those who are suffering. The other one is challenge and change the existing narratives. And the final one is hope is a superpower. And a lot of people talk of hope as a superpower, which is why I was so excited to come here, because people are talking about hope as opposed to Nawek, which is also a problem. So on the question of liberation and just dialogue, I just wanted to find out from everyone here, like, just to have an idea of the audience, is there anybody who's in university at the moment? Anybody under 40? Great. Okay, good. So I don't know if anyone has seen an iceberg before. Has anyone seen an iceberg? He's the only one in the room. Does everyone know what an iceberg is? Yes. So
I lived in northern Canada, so it was cool.
Right, so I haven't seen an iceberg, but the idea of an iceberg is that there's something on top, and then beneath it there's something larger, which cannot be seen. So one of those things is the youth struggle, if you like, or youth empowerment, or the current paradigm of our youth.
Nancy, can I make an announcement?
Please.
I know people are leaving for prayer, and if you can just wait when Nancy finishes, then we can all break for prayer. So I wanted to tell those ladies, but unless you want to go grab them, then you'll be allowed to leave. Just tell them to wait until Nancy finishes.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
So when we speak about the iceberg of the youth issue, 60%, Mr. Manjang already alluded to 60% of people. And I didn't give the caveat that Mr. Manjang gave, but whenever I'm invited to speak, I use that platform to speak about what I want, as opposed to what I'm asked to do. And there's a reason for that. So when we look at the youth problem, what we see is youth unemployment. We see maybe youth that are unskilled. What else do you see when you look at the youth issue? That's the audience, by the way.
Impatient.
It's a dialogue.
Mr. Manjang talked
Is
about
your hand
that
up?
Impatience.
Impatience. Okay. Anything else?
From Manjang, so
Anything else? Yes? Incompetence in self-innovation. Okay. That's a big one. Anybody else? Sorry? Lack of hope or hopelessness. Okay.
And if we want to give some positives too, strength, time.
The question was actually for the problem, sorry.
For the problems, okay.
Yes? Improper mindset, okay. Anything else? Okay. So that's what we see. This is the manifestation of what we call the root causes. But when you think of what are the root causes of the situation where our youth can't find work, or our youth are struggling as it is, what would you say is the root cause? What causes these issues? The hint is none of the ones that you can see. What are some of these things that you think causes them?
I think it's about the culture we live in, or the environment. Our environment becomes the way we think and the way we do things around us.
So the culture and environment determines the way we think and the way we do things around us. Can you be specific to what part of the culture?
Probably the culture in our parents, if you have to be successful, you have to be in a professional setting, like Mangan said. And the culture that we have to be successful, you have to be in a student life. The culture that we have to be successful, you have to have a university degree or so. So once this culture and mindset has been changed, and be successful, you need to be successful will be very difficult.
Okay. So parent mindset is what he said, and the way that parents view success. Is there anyone else? Yes?
Reliability also plays a role.
You can't hear?
I mean, reliability also plays a role. Like, we tend to rely too much on others for everything.
Okay.
Like, when you're a student, let's say during holidays, you can do a part-time job or, you know, go to a tailoring shop or assist yourself with something so that when school resumes, at least your parents will be paying school fees and you will be taking care of your lunch. But like, we just relax and rely like 100% on our parents or our mentors and everyone to just do everything for us. So when we are done, we find it very difficult to stand on our own or to start up something on your own because
Okay.
you're not used to it.
Okay. So dependence and a lack of self-reliance. Thank you. So I wanted to point to, thank you for your contributions. I wanted to point to some of them that Mr. Manjang referred to. One of them is the historical context. The other one is our political context as well as our cultural context. So Mr. Manjang pointed to an enabling environment and the government's need to create work. And some of that begins at school. So a lot of what we think is culture actually begins at school. And if I was in a different cultural context, if I had a dialogue, several people's hands would go up. In this particular context, it's not normal for someone to sit who is supposed to lecture and then ask you for information, because it's usually a one-way street where the holder of knowledge is always the teacher. So that in itself sets a conditioning for a lifetime, because whoever is above you is the person who holds the knowledge, who has the monopoly of knowledge. And of course, the person who has that monopoly also will have some monopoly on power. So that's another thing I wanted to speak about, power. So if we look at power now, and I'll put Mr. Manjang and Mr. Fal on the spot, who are extremely successful, and young people. Who would you say is more powerful? Would you say Mr. Manjang and Mr. Esas, or put them in one group and one generation, or your generation in the Gambia? Who do you say wields the most power?
I believe success in power.
Sorry?
Both of them are success in power. We talk about success in power.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk people,
Mm-hmm.
when people educated.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's not comparing the two. He's saying between this and the youth.
Between, right, uh-huh.
It's again too much. About levels of war.
Mm-hmm.
The second is about Apple.
Mm-hmm.
About Apple companies and Apple success. It's what power do. So when you talk, this man talk about bad men who win, which are past all those. So something like that.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Well, sure.
Okay. Who do you think holds the power? The older generation holds the power. And why do you think that? There's more of the, Mr. Manjang mentioned that there's 60% of people in the Gambia are under the age of 35, between 18 and 35. So why is it that the power lies in the hands of the minority?
I would think that the power lies with the majority, not because...
Or the perceived power.
But because they have greater opportunities to change and correct things that we don't.
Okay.
They have more energy to do things than we do. They have greater creativity. They have greater access to, or greater knowledge to the new ways of the world.
Right.
The other day I have this new Microsoft laptop. There are a lot of things, but a lot of features in this laptop that I can use.
Right.
Because I am not so tuned to it. If I want to do things with my mobile phone, I call my son. So they have a greater latitude to do things than we do. Of course, maybe if you compare us to them, because we are basically a spent force. And because we are a spent force, we have achieved certain things. But they are still a force, and they have not been spent with the greater propensity to achieve a lot more than we have achieved. So perhaps with the right environment, they will do a whole lot better than we have. Maybe that is true.
I'll take a different angle.
So let me just re-summarize. So Mr. Fall said that the power lies with the youth. How many of the youth believe that the power lies with them? How many of the young people, you don't necessarily, you believe that the power lies with you? Yeah. And you're more powerful than Esa? Good. Yes. Yes.
That's not to say that's the right thing.
Absolutely.
That is the wrong thing, but that's the real.
Right.
I think what I was saying, I think the young people should actually drive this thing because they have the power. But they are, see, when you have something and you're not taking possession of somebody else's, which is exactly what is happening. And that's what I'm saying. They have to move away from this notion about, you talk to people here, there's this thing about you are the tomorrow. And that's futuristic. That is wrong. It is today. I mean, you can actually drive and change and control what's happening today. But until such time you take it, somebody will take it, even if it is not there, but they will, which is exactly what is happening now. That needs to change. The only way it will change is by people getting conscious of it, acknowledging it, actually recognizing they have an authority that they are not using. When they start exercising, then the power will come back. And rightfully, then they will. But until then, unfortunately, it is not. So they need to work to change that.
So Mr. Manjang says that the perceived power and the actual power are
different. At the moment, from where we stand and where we look at our country and our paradigm, the power lies with those who are older, more successful, if you like. But the power is there if you want to exercise it. It's whether you're ready to own that power. Yeah, there was a gentleman behind me. Right.
Piggyback on what he said. I think, yes, there's perceived power. When it comes to you, there's two things that's a stumbling block. One is cultural, and the other one is political.
It's what?
Politics,
right.
Political, anyway. So the cultural part of it is that we Gambians, we are taught at a very early age that, we are taught to be very dependent on, our older folks. What that means is that you will see someone from the onset, from the time they're very young to the time that they even graduate from high school, having taught or having told what to do. In some instances, actually, in some homes, even the subject that you pick, that are picked by your parents. So when you grow up in that mindset, it's very hard to move away from that. And then that's culturally per se. And even within our community, youths don't have that much voice. Everything you want to say as a young, or, young Gambian, they're always a voice, even inside, either inside you or out, that will actually be saying, that you are not in the right place. It's not, it's not your time yet. You have to wait for your time. And that's the cultural part. The political part is that, of course, I don't want to get too much in politics, but we've seen it in all the government that we've had. There isn't that invitation of youth. You look at a place like Rwanda, there's very young, dynamic leaders that are also helping the government, or that are part of the government, that give youth the hope that, despite the age, if I'm competent enough, I can be in that position. And that's the white collar that we're talking about. Now, I don't want to get into the entrepreneurial side of it, but these are two things right now that are hindering Gambian youth as far as, the power that we have. There isn't that avenue to harness those powers, because there's few stumbling blocks that we have to talk, amongst ourselves. We have to give the youth a chance, to showcase their talent, to show that, power lies in them. But there's a generation ahead of us that are also willing, like the wall of say, take them, they're not take a bit where they want to go. So I think that's those few things that I think, if those things are tackled and those things are tabled, youth will see themselves that they are also game changers in our society, rather than just put them in a corner and label them and say, okay, wait for your turn. And like you just said, it's not, you are the future of tomorrow. What happened today? You understand? So I think those are things, the political part and the cultural part plays a bigger part. And then until we address those things, we're moving in circles.
Thank you. So let me just re-summarize what he said, please. So one of the things the gentleman behind Mr. Manjang said, Pa Omar Gay, thank you, said was that there are obstacles to claiming this power. And these obstacles are your parents, who I'm assuming your parents are the age group that we're talking about that currently hold the power?
Not necessarily parents, but
society. Society holds the power. Okay, that's the cultural part. And politically, it hasn't been done before. Okay. Yes, please. Yeah, sorry. There was a gentleman who had his hand. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No matter how you think you are, how good you are, at your age, you say you want to buy a position, and you say, no, you want to represent because of your age. I don't know how much experience do we need to go in this position. How many years do you have to work experience do we have? Is it 20 years, 30 years, for us to do? When the youth sometimes, you want to go in position, you say, okay, we want so and so, I want Mr. Jawad to be there.
Right.
But I'm educated, I'm eloquent, I want to be there. You say, no, you have the education, you are eloquent, you don't have the age to be there. Within ourselves.
Right.
So maybe the institutions are doing better in that aspect.
Okay. So there's age discrimination in our institutions.
Along with whenever you're going against someone older than you.
Yes.
The moment you say something you don't like, even if you're right, you're disrespectful.
Right.
The moment you're called disrespectful, no one else takes you seriously.
Right. Okay. So let me summarize what you're saying. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit. What you're saying is that institutionally there's age discrimination, and also, in a sense, you don't want to be unpopular with those who hold the power. Yes.
I think I have a similar view with that other guy. The youth believe that they have power.
Yeah.
But I think the society believes that the society don't have interest in what youth are doing.
Right.
If youth go into entrepreneurship, I and my friend, we are qualified accountants, we set up an accounting firm.
Right.
We face this challenge sometimes. We talk to people that, okay, we want to do bookkeeping for you, we want to maintain your books, what would they tell you? I mean, they wouldn't tell you directly, but from their actions, it tells that, they didn't have the belief. But what I tell them is, this is not about the number of years. I've gone through the same training, professional training like, Amadou Sane or Manjan here.
Yeah.
The only difference will be, the only difference will be, we are more, conversant with the new standard when it comes to those areas. So I tell them, we have the power, and we have the interest. We should have interest in the youth.
Right.
Because the older generation may not do it in the right way, sometimes maybe because of their schedule also, or because they have more clientele also. So I think the issue here is people don't have interest in the youth, but the youth have power.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, there's a societal argument that the youth have power. They have the knowledge, the same knowledge, but they're being doubted even by the youth. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to illustrate, and one of the reasons why dialogue is so powerful is because you can see what's happening in the room. So I put the question out, and initially only Esa and Muhammadu answered the question. So immediately they had the answers and power was on their side. Although they are almost clearly the minority here. And this is a microcosm of what happens in the society. But you've just relinquished that power to the two of them. They didn't ask for it, but you just gave it. And it was only, I am not sure which of the young people spoke first. Was it you, Omar, or it was you? And I saw that it was only when someone spoke, then the hands went out. So it took one person to disrupt that dynamic. And that's no different from the real world. No one is going to give you their power. Those two things. No one is going to give you power. No one is going to give you privilege. These are things that you have to claim yourself. Your power is inherent. It's always there. You have to tap into it. So that's one of the reasons that we do dialogue, because if I came and told you, oh, you're more powerful than Esa and Manjangan, you can just take your power away and you can do da-da-da-da, you'd be like, no, it's not possible. But you're the majority. You're 60%. You just have to tap into that power. You didn't have to ask Esa if you could speak. You didn't have to ask Mr. Manjang if you could speak. You didn't have to ask your parents if you could speak. You just did it, and it just flowed. So hopefully, once you go out, you will start to do that more. It'll be uncomfortable initially, and then it will become the norm.
Thanks.
One of the things that when we look, I'll use Talib as an example. Talib was 30 when he became the mayor of Kanifing, which is the largest municipality. Yes, there's a question of privilege there, but he still became the mayor. And one of his slogans was not too young to lead. And I think that is so important. If you believe that you're not too young to lead, you have the constituency, there's 60%. So you speak their language, you have the codes of the youth. It's more easier for you to convince someone your age than say Mr. Manjang or Esa or even myself or anyone who's older. But you have to be willing to sacrifice, one, to change the narrative. And I think Mr. Manjang spoke about sacrifice. Not everybody's going to like you. Wherever I speak, sometimes I'm not invited again. In fact, I came prepared for the... I came prepared to be told this is not a political space. Don't speak about politics or leave. But once you have that moment and when you sit on that table, I always say that. When you sit on that table, make sure that what you're saying is true, it's honest, and it's authentic. That's important because once you start minding what does X think, what does Y think, then you will always toe the line. You will never break the mold which you're trying to break. The other little one I wanted to speak about was a single story, the danger of a single story. So Chimamanda speaks a lot about this. So the single story for our youth is you're young, your parents decide, you're powerless, You know, there's many single stories. You don't have the skills, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the experience. But we would not be sitting where we are sitting today speaking about politics if it wasn't for the youth. The youth were one of the first people that I saw out in 2016. The change belonged to the youth. Maybe it was spearheaded by someone else, but I know that the youth gave us courage to come outside because you guys were there And that's the other thing that Mr. Manjang also spoke about, the beauty of risk at your age. When I was at university, that was when Tony Blair went to war with Iraq in the beginning. And the whole summer of the university was just protests. We had outside of our doors, we had things saying, not in my name, and da-da-da-da. And this was the culture. We were actually told, if you don't like it, change it. If you don't like it, change it. It's no good to complain. No one's going to come and change it for you. And certainly not the person who's in privilege. So if you don't like it, change it. You have all the power. They've just shown that. The other thing I wanted to speak about is the system. The system. Because I think very often we're speaking about individual success when we speak. That, you know, Esa made it against the odds, and Mr. Manjang made it against the odds through hard work. And I think that's amazing. It's good to have these success stories. I am very idealistic. I think Esa said, don't be idealistic. So I'll just put that out there. I'm extremely idealistic because I think sometimes you have to be idealistic. You know, you'd have to be idealistic to be someone like Nelson Mandela, who was in prison for 27 years and even thought that he could come out one day, you know? Or that you were faced with apartheid and you thought that you could have equity at some point. You know, that still hasn't been achieved, but it's the dream of someone who was idealistic. We were idealistic after 22 years of a dictatorship that we would ever know what freedom was and that we could change through the power of the vote. So we are an idealistic people. Some of the stories that we lose out on is because we're not taught our history. One of the things is when we say protest, everyone's like, oh my God, Gambians don't protest. Edward Francis Small protested, and he was a youth at 24. This is why we're independent today. So there needs to be a historical context. I don't know who said it, and I'm really bad with memory and quotes, but it's that, you know, once you take away people's history and the understanding of their history, then you can colonize them. And that's what colonization did to us. That's what it did to the education system. That's why you can come into a room and sit and say anything and not be challenged. And not be challenged for 22 years or 3 years when they're jot. Because we've been conditioned in this way to just sit down and say nothing. And just say, Yala bahna, ndesan, yala. Seta si yala, nyana si yala. Exactly. Everything that comes along with that. And this is conditioning. We can blame our parents, we can blame the older generation, but what I'm saying is to have agency at this age. We're older. When Yaya Jammeh came in, I was 14. I am 40 today. You know, I spoke to an activist before I came. He said when Yaya Jammeh came, he was 24. He's 50 now. You know, and his entire youth has been stolen simply because as a people, we did not stand up to say, this is not right, this is not my ideal. This, you know, we did not make that sacrifice. Some people did, and they paid the price. But collectively, the power lies with the people. Okay, I think I'll stop there. I guess what I'm saying is a call to courage. There were people like Julius Nyerere, and maybe I'm not pronouncing his name right, but he was one of the first people on the continent to gain independence in Tanzania. And he had a pathway or a vision for Africa. And one of these visions was rooted in self-reliance of education. So education for liberation. Now, education is not something that happens in the classroom. I'm not really a fan, even though I run schools. I'm not a fan of education in the classroom or education through books. I think there's education everywhere. And one of the biggest, strongest educations is dialogue. So speaking with people about your current context, which Esa did in Banjul, hanging out with the Nongos, that was something that was completely shielded around, so my street smartness is 0. And actually speaking in a way that liberates. And one of those ways is to actually provide space for dissent, for opinions that are not yours. And we can see that our state struggles with that. It's always struggled with that since independence. If we don't listen to opinions that are not ours, we become this monotony of opinions that are exactly the same. Everybody does the same thing. There's no innovation, no entrepreneurship. Nothing of that sort. I started a Montessori school. Montessori is 100 years old. So just to give you the history of Montessori, it was started by a lady called Maria Montessori, and she was basically learning by doing. So our 8-year-olds and our 9-year-olds well, our 6-year-olds actually can make a chair from plywood. So they stick it, it doesn't work with glue, then they use nails, but they have a process of failure that we encourage. So first of all, we never go and tell them this is how it's to be done. We let them discover through doing. There's no shame involved. If you get it wrong, that's fine. You got it wrong, you do it again. We don't even give a commentary on whether it's wrong or right. Because when someone feels ashamed to do something, then you're less likely to disagree with people who you feel are older than you because you're ashamed. But if you're given that space to grow, then you are able to grow and do things. When I started a Montessori school, people were like, oh, for that money, a nursery school? No way is anyone going to go there. And I started with 6 children, and in 3 months, I had a waiting list. The US Embassy, and I use the US Embassy, but they're not a measure of quality for me. I'm just going to use it because I know that that's what a lot of people use as a standard. The US Embassy said that we were one of the best one of the best schools in the region. So one of the officers from the US Embassy actually said that. And this was only after a year, less than a year. But I chose to do something differently, and I think that's how we need to think. We don't need to do things, and I think Esa said, like Esa did it, or Mr. Manjang, or me, or anyone, find your own path and chart it. But it's a call to courage, really. I think there's no better time than now to be a youth. I think there's no better time than now than to speak your truth and to stand with your truth. There's no better time than now to dissent with what you see that doesn't work, especially politically, because half of the people who are making these political decisions are not going to be here in the next 20 years. You guys are going to have to field the bad loans that are taken, the institutions that have been broken. You're the ones who are going to have to field the people who have been uneducated and miseducated. You are the ones who are going to find that solution. So it's time that you act.
Oh, it's been a great day. 3 amazing speeches. That's just amazing. So for those of you who went to pray, you've really missed a lot. And the time of prayer is still within, like, there is you'll also have a benefit of listening to this again online. So it's really worth listening to. If I may just say, add something, a personal story just to complement what was said. And I think you also wanted to say something. We'll give you an opportunity before we break for prayer, and lunch should be in its way now. I remembered, like, as when I just graduated from university, with my master's, I mean, my first job. Well, my first job was really while I was doing my master's. But when I finished my master's and I was working as a full-time employee, we worked on, if you know, the city of Edmonton has a multi-story parkade that we engineered, our company engineered, and I did most of the number crunching as the junior engineer. And we had issues to solve, very difficult issues. So I was taken along by the senior guys, by the engineering manager and very senior engineers to a meeting with the constructor, with the client, and everybody was much older than myself. And coming from the culture in Gambia where the youngest person doesn't say anything, I just remained quiet throughout the meeting. So, and the problem was something that I thought I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it because it's our culture not to say anything when the elders are around. So on our way back, I kind of even had to force myself to tell this to my bosses. I said, you know what about this, that, and that? You know, I almost got fired because that was the answer. And I should have said it in the meeting. Why didn't you say it there? That was the answer. Why did you say it? Why didn't you have an opinion? You know, even if it was wrong, so what? Again, the question was not that I knew the answer and I kept quiet. The problem with them was that I did not want to voice out my opinion. You know, and it took many years before I could tell them, this is a different culture. In my culture, I'm not allowed, I'm not expected to say anything. So in that culture, you are expected to say things. And maybe, who knows, maybe that's why they're more developed than we are. So again, the youth, more than 60% of the population, with the strength, I don't know who has the strength, whether you go with Esa or you go with Manjang's opinion, but voice out. And like I said, it only takes one person to break, do they call it the glass ceiling? You know, so it just takes one person. So maybe meetings like this would give you the power that you really have already. You're not using it. Or like me, in that meeting, knowing the answer and I didn't say it. You know, it would have brought me much fame, it would have brought my company much fame if we had a solution that came from within our company. But the important thing is, speak out. So it's been very interesting, and it was more of a dialogue, so I didn't take as many notes because, you know, it's very, very interesting, and I don't know whether we should, it's 2:25, we can still go on for 30, 45 minutes before we are worried about the salah time, the prayer time before it expires. So we can do that, or we can break for prayer, come back for questions and answer and more dialogue before lunch comes in and before the next speaker arrives. Please decide. Yeah. Yeah, we need one of the youth to break the ice this time.
Question and answer. Question and answer now?
I would prefer we pray and then come back so that we will not rush.
We will not rush, yes. That's my opinion too, but I want to give you the... So more, you know...
We are done.
I think it's better we continue, since you are also recording live and we already have our different audience viewing it. If you continue, it will be so hard to lose it because we already have people on the line almost asking questions that they want to ask. So you continue to spend about 20 minutes time to wrap this up, and then after that we pray and leave.
And again, 20-25 minutes is not a problem. We can pray at 3 o'clock. It's still within. In fact, we can pray up to Asr time, and Asr is about, I don't know, about 4:15. So if we, at 3:30 we need to rush, make wudu and pray. Or are we going to do it democratically, vote, or?
For technical reasons, we have to continue. Let's continue for technical reasons.
Because I really don't want to lose more people like we did when some people went out to pray. I want to have everybody here. And I want to have especially those online. It is going to be, and I really don't want to be rushed.
In order to give everyone room, we need enough time and comfortable time. So we cannot rush the question and answer because we have to pray. So it's better we pray first.
And some people didn't wait for the democracy anyway, for the vote. So
I think we have to wait for that. Already the meeting was coming, the conference was late. It was supposed to start at 9 and it started at 12. So we are going to break.
Sorry, but no, we need you back. We really want you back.
I want to be here till 3, but I was supposed to leave here by 1. I will not be here till 3.
Ustaz saying what prayer? We can do it a really quick prayer. Oh, well, the more we